This strange combination of ambition, of energy, of drive and vision, along with a certain humility and kindness. And you don't often find that in really powerful leaders.
He truly stands as an embodiment of a mega icon.
Driven by purpose and inspired by impact, that's the man Keshav Murugesh for you.
Everything around him, kind of grows and thrives, and he ensures that, people are happy. Like, everybody gravitates towards a ray of sunshine.
Charming, perceptive, a visionary, a leader for sure.
Who's a mega icon? One who defies conventions and leads the way, whose impact is larger than life and destined to leave a mark.
After back-to-back successes at ITC and Sintel, the turnaround Turk is back at it again.
Keshav Murugesh's revival of WNS has stunned the business world.
Murugesh's new innovation puts India on the global map as a prime BPM hub.
He has changed the face of the BPM industry forever.
Keshav Murugesh, the CEO of the biggest BPM in the world. Hard to imagine now. We all thought he would land up as a cricketer.
Keshav joined our school, Don Bosco, in the 3rd standard. I know him until now, so it's almost close to about 50 years plus that I've known Keshav.
He was a person with, a lot of wit and, could bring a smile to anybody's face. Of course, his passion was cricket. He always had his attention veered towards that game. His mom, in those times, was the manager of the women's cricket team. They lived and breathed cricket.
His dad, Murugesh uncle, was a legendary figure in the cricket field. His dad was a major inspiration for Keshav. We used to go to see his matches, and he was very serious about playing cricket for school.
My focus was completely on, the cricket field and hoping to be selected in the sub-junior team for the school.
Which goes back to Arabian Sea, not Bay of Bengal.
But when the team was actually announced, the coach goes class to class and calls out students who are selected.
Vishwanathan, Jansen,
I was left out of that team, and I was so disappointed. The only thing I could think of is, I am left out, I am left out, I am left out, but my friends are selected. I spoke to my father about it. He said, you get back to coaching, go back to the ground, practice, like crazy, and do whatever you can to get selected in the team the next year.
He took it on himself to do well, impress the coach again, and he came back. He came back stronger than before.
Nelson Mandela once said, don't judge me by my successes. Judge me by the number of times I fell down and stood up again. I owned a cricket bat, David Boone's bat. I was very thrilled. I had this beautiful cricket bat, I had a pair of Dunlop green flash shoes, and I thought I was heading to the stars in terms of cricketing. One day, my father, he just had some difference with his boss, quit his job, and came back home, and I had to support that.
That was a turning point in Keshav's life, because people go through these things, but how you fight back And adversities make you stronger. That's the character which stood out in Keshav, which we saw.
So one of the things I did was to become a sub-broker of 3 well-known stockbrokers. And I earned that 1.5–2% of brokerage. And I remember I did successfully sell quite a few IPOs, which are really big companies today.
He had that in him, that spark in him to fight out a battle, which transformed him and made him what he is today.
While doing CA, I also had to make a choice of actually helping my father create a business. We focused on buying and selling TVs. When you sell TVs, one of the things I realized is that in India, you will have TV shops right next to each other selling the same brands. So you have to differentiate. When a customer came in and they said, why should I pay you 400 rupees more? I would switch on a light behind the TV and say, mine is a German or a Japanese tube, a Telefunken tube or a Japanese tube. And that would actually convince the client that probably this TV was better. And even now, as I run a large company and as I've run large companies across the years, I have always used that business ethic, that the customer is always right. In December of, I think it was 1989 or so, when a telegram came home from ITC Limited, inviting me for a interview. I met my father and he said, they've offered you airfare. You should go, right? Because, it was, I think, my first air journey, very frankly. So again, the boy in me was, greedy, was very, happy that I was getting an airfare. So I said, what is the harm? I'll go for 2 days and come back. So I went off to Calcutta. I participated in that interview process where they actually had the best and the brightest come in from all over India for that final interview. But then the HR leader told me that, look, you have to go and meet the finance director of ITC, who actually does the final interview. So I waited. He kept me waiting for 3.5 hours. And I think in the car while coming, he had read my profile.
Mr. Murugesh, the boss will see you now.
He had, I think, already made up his mind not to select me. Because as soon as I walked in, he actually growled at me. And he said, how are you even in this selection group? Because you do not belong to the big 4. So I said, may I at least sit down? So the first thing I told him was that I read your annual reports regularly and they are full of mistakes. And that's the way I wanted to get his attention.
Last year's annual report, have a look.
And I pointed out in 2-3 areas, translation errors, language errors, minor errors. And he said, you know what, you have actually changed my mind. I'm selecting you right away. I would really want you to join ITC. And I walked out of there with an offer letter. So one great example I can tell you is, I participated in a very interesting transaction once. And in that transaction, the ITC companies also made a very decent profit. And we made that profit without ITC making any investment because of some initiative I had shown. And my boss at that time was super impressed.
Hi, Keshav.
But what I felt most inspired about was when he walked into my office one day. He said, I don't know how else to recognize you, but I have personally paid from my pocket and bought you this 10 grams or 20 grams, a small piece of gold. I then realized how important it was to motivate people, make them feel good.
Sir, even though I can't wear this, but this would be my gold medal.
Give them a pat on the back, when they do a good job, however small it is.
After spending 13 valuable years at ITC, Keshav moved on to a struggling IT company, Sintel, turning it into one of the world's 100 fastest growing small companies. But the turnaround Turk was not done just yet. It was time to reinvent the BPO industry.
I guess my first impression of Keshav was it was very clear to myself and everyone that he was going to be shaking up the status quo.
Legacy BPOs at the time, with call centers in India, relied on the low-cost labor arbitrage model.
To give you some history here, BPM industry was known as BPO. BPO is business process outsourcing and BPM is business process management. Now, in the early days, let's say what we call back office operations, customer support, technical support, help desk, they were being done in India by the BPO industry.
While the low-cost BPO model became an attractive option for companies in the West, it was evident that the industry needed a shake-up. Keshav saw great potential for growth in the sector, something he initiated when he joined WNS, a New York Stock Exchange-listed company set up as a captive for British Airways in 1996.
WNS, after it became public, was lacking the leadership it needed to take the company to the next level, and the share price was also heading in the wrong direction because of its exposure to financial services companies during the financial crisis. So we initiated a search for the new CEO, and the guy at the top of the list was Keshav. So there I was waiting for the man that they called the turnaround Turk. I had an hour to try and convince him to be the new CEO.
So we sat down and then he spoke to me about this company called WNS.
I knew instantly he was the right guy to run this business. We talked intensively.
And then at the end of 45 minutes, I said, time for me to, leave. He also said, yeah, time for me also to leave. And I said, but where are you going? And he pointed to an aircraft. And he said, I flew in from London on that aircraft, and I'm now flying back on that aircraft. That's the time that the impact of that conversation hit me, that somebody was willing to make an effort of flying 18 hours in order to have a 45-minute meeting with somebody he didn't know anything about.
And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. He was the right guy to run this business, and he's proved that many times over.
When I took the role at WNS and came in, it was in a situation which was actually in downward spiral. So when I came in, I actually had to, I walked into the deep end of the pool, and I had to, really pull together a lot of assets as well as try and create some magic that would help differentiate us.
For a CEO to be effective, it's very important that they make the best decision possible given the information on reality that's out there, not information that's been fed to them because that's what people want them to hear.
So one of the first things I did was, engage with a lot of people inside the company. I was shocked when the feedback was they did not trust senior management at all, right? And they actually felt that senior management had let them down. And that was a good starting point for me to actually hold, my first meeting. Rather than follow the traditional model of just inviting 5 or 6 of the senior leaders to a strategy meeting, I branded and created a very interesting meeting format called the 7 Samurai format, which 14 years later also is still in force and still motivates a lot of people.
Empowering people to speak and then giving them a forum to speak, critique, understand, appreciate, and discuss, right? And that's what Samurai was.
The first program that we created that was a trailblazer, I would say, is a program called Bravo.
Bravo obviously is our annual event where we bring together people across the organization to celebrate successes.
People are getting very excited. A Porsche is going to be given away. And I said, hey, this is my kind of company. Where do I sign up for a Porsche?
However, rewarding star performers wasn't enough to retain talent. So Murugesh introduced Wincubate.
Wincubate is a program where innovation is rewarded in terms of the ability to create new services, new offerings, new capabilities within the company, and then to take those ideas to market.
But I think what is the secret sauce there is, along with that one offering that wins the award, I also managed to get at least 15 to 20 other offerings free of cost. And all the people who were selected for these awards chose to get shares of WNS, which means I retained them, I was able to hold them for the long term. one of the things that I was able to enforce was that what brought us there would not take us to the next level of growth. We announced that we will be the first company that will introduce an end-to-end vertically aligned strategy.
Verticalization essentially meant that there was a memory within the WNS system of how a specific industry operates.
And therefore, the ability to engage with clients dramatically increased.
Virgin Atlantic and WNS have been working together for over 20 years. When you show up at a WNS office, you immediately get the sensation that the team working in WNS don't only work just for WNS. They have a strong affinity with us, their customer. Keshav, WNS exhibit the same ethos and vision about people and customers, and that's why we get along so well.
Soon, the industry was transformed and most companies began to adopt a verticalized strategy.
Keshav was at the forefront and coined that acronym BPM is when he was with NASSCOM. If you fast forward now to 2023 and look at where the BPO industry, BPM industry is today, obviously completely different positioning.
There's no doubt that Keshav, along with strong advocacy by the tech industry body NASSCOM, National Association of Software and Service Companies, that he was chairman of from 2019-2020, has been instrumental in repositioning and rebranding BPOs into BPMs.
That was a masterstroke by Keshav and his team.
Today, WNS partners with over 400 clients, offering a range of industry-specific BPM solutions through 60,000 personnel across 66 global hubs, providing BPM services such as customer experience, accounts, HR, procurement and analytics, with the help of artificial intelligence, machine learning and generative AI, enabling WNS to consistently reinvent the digital future of business.
Yeah, I think that this is probably one of India's most wonderful success stories. The
company was doing extremely well. We were the leader in terms of growth rates. We were the leader in terms of delivering higher profitability than the peer set. Our stock was doing quite well. And overnight, all the countries that we operated in, including India, suddenly shut down.
Cities in crisis, COVID-19 lockdown brings urban life to a standstill. Streets empty and landmarks deserted.
COVID-19 curfews leave cities quiet and dim.
We had no idea the pandemic was coming.
And that was a very strict lockdown, as even a bird cannot fly, as we used to say.
Our systems were not geared up to handle this.
Pandemic came and he was back into the thick of things, and he had to do a lot to ensure that people don't lose jobs.
At that point in time, actually, I was the chairman of NASSCOM, and I had to start working with the government to essentially declare IT services and business process as an essential service.
We had more than 4 million engineers servicing the customers around the world. So if our work comes to stop, most of the applications around the world will also come to a halt.
We were able to convince the government, and I can tell you the government was extremely supportive and has always been very supportive of our industry.
Airlines were probably the first hit by the pandemic and the hardest hit. And the only way we could really live up to the expectations of our customers from Virgin Atlantic was through working very rapidly and quickly with WNS to provide service to our customers. And that made a dramatic difference to the way people viewed Virgin Atlantic in this crisis.
But I think part of why WNS was able to handle it well is that these discussions preceded the pandemic.
Behind every great company is a host of other companies that make us do what we do, right? And WNS is exactly one of those companies.
So when the world held its breath. I think WNS completely recreated what this industry stands for.
WNS reinvented the BPM industry during the COVID-19 pandemic under Keshav's agile leadership. But there were other beneficiaries too.
He is a very different kind of investor. He rolls up his sleeves and joins the founders and the senior management. When COVID came, the world came to a standstill. At that point of time, he said, don't see this as a challenge, see it as an opportunity and do something big.
Keshav is a trailblazer in business and philanthropy, and he's pushed the limits to do amazing things.
For us, giving back is extremely important in whichever way, small, big. Where we are today with WNS Cares Foundation is a lot of satisfaction from where we started.
Good afternoon.
My name is Tej Rajesh More and my project name is Flood Alert.
And therefore, we created WNS Cares Foundation, many years ago. An organization I'm extremely, passionate about. It is an organization that makes sure that as the company grows, people around each of the campuses we operate in feel they're part of that growth. We work on some key initiatives there, specifically around empowerment of children. I think lots of interesting business ideas also have now been generated.
Normally what I found with corporates is they'll depute their CSR head. In his case, he was leading from the front, which meant that it mattered to him and that he genuinely cared.
What do you think his legacy will be?
I think Keshav's legacy will be that he's been a good human being. I think that's what it is. I mean, it kind of... But that's what he is. And that's what his legacy will be.
Ultimately, all of us leave legacies. And the reason I say this is very important because over a period of time, you will see that more of us, will move to other things as we leave the company to the next generation. I think going forward, what I would look forward to doing is achieving more in other areas. So for example, achieving the calmness of Chamonix, the passion and zest for life that my father, my mother, and my mother-in-law have, and the affection and the ability to move between having fun and working hard that my children have. That's a goal I'm going for now.